Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next fireside chat with our Rainbow Babies and Children's Foundation presidents. Today, I have Danny Weiner, who was president from 2022 to 2024. Thank you so much for being with us today, Danny.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start us off with some rapid fire warm-up questions, okay? Just so we can get to know you a little better. So my first question is coffee or tea or something
Coffee.
else? Coffee. How do you like your coffee?
I like coffee adjacent beverages, like a latte. I always like iced, even when it's
Oh,
cold out.
what was your first job ever?
Research assistant in the history department at Harvard.
Is there a book, movie, or show that you always recommend to people?
I mean, my favorite movie of all time is The Wizard of Oz, but I feel like everybody has seen that. So in terms of shows, Gilmore Girls is I always recommend that, especially to mothers and daughters.
Well, if you could have dinner with anybody, who would it be and why?
Probably George Washington,
Oh, okay.
early
Okay.
American history. So
Oh, yes, this would make a lot of sense. This would
yeah.
make a lot of sense. Okay. What is your favorite time of the year and why?
Spring because summer is coming. But you
Mm-hmm.
have that long runway, like summer, once you hit the 4th of July, I'm in like, oh my God, summer's going to be over soon mode. So that kind of first day of spring where you know that winter is not returning, that's my favorite time of year.
What is one thing you can't start your day without?
Oh, snuggling with my dog, Stanley.
What is something surprising about you that people might not know?
I know I'm a very avid hiker and climber. I've done like 15 of the 14,000-foot peaks out in Colorado, and I done as much as like 28 miles and 8,000 vertical feet in a day, like just as a day hike. And so I hike a ton.
Let me go to the main questions about your
Okay.
presidency. So, what inspired you to get involved with the Rainbow Babies and Children's Foundation?
So I got involved initially when I was 13 years old. I had my bat mitzvah, and in lieu of gifts, I asked for donations. And this was pre-child life, pre-playrooms and everything. So I raised money to furnish a playroom, and my very generous grandparents donated a playroom at Rainbow, which I furnished, and that kind of became the first child life space. So that program really kind of came to be after that. And now every floor has multiple playrooms with books, toys, child life specialists. So that was my initial foray into Rainbow. And then I went off to college and left Cleveland. And then when I came back, I got roped in. One of the other things I did in Boston while I was working at Harvard was I worked in child life. I volunteered at Boston Children's Hospital. So I got a little firsthand experience there. And then when I came back, I got involved in Ride the Rainbow. This was before I joined the board. And then they asked me to join the foundation, and kind of all took off from there.
That's such a cool story. How did that path lead to you becoming the president?
Yeah, it was an interesting path because when I joined, I was by far the youngest person who had ever joined the board. Since then, we've had women in their early 40s, late 30s. When I joined, that was not a thing. It was very much a older, like not older women, but older than I was. And so I joined, and I was definitely the baby of the board. And I feel like everyone gave me a little bit of a hard time, just because I was so much younger. And so I was asked, I think about halfway through I mean, I was helping out with Ride the Rainbow every year, chaired the auction, and then I got asked to chair that event and also chair the trustee committee. And then as I got more responsibilities, then eventually Colette, before she retired, it was my 9th year on the board, and she called me, and I thought she was, wishing me well as I left the board. And she asked me if I would consider taking over for her and being president. So I gave it a lot of thought and talked to my other half and said yes. And that's kind of how it all happened.
What was one of the most memorable projects or initiatives you worked on during your presidency?
I mean, it was definitely the change to our endowment, and our new gift policy statement. That was a huge shift from how we've always done things on the foundation. So that was definitely my big project. To a lesser extent, but still a big project, was switching to an outsourced CIO. but I think that was a little bit eclipsed by the whole change in our gifting.
And then what was the most challenging part about being president? And how did you navigate that?
Just the change in gift policy was for sure the most challenging. I mean, it was a sensitive subject. I had to do some finessing with past presidents and past trustees, and there was a lot of education required. We hadn't really focused on endowment spending or what a typical endowment model looks like. So it was a lot of work to engage trustees and educate them on the topic and kind of bring them along in the thought process. And I didn't want to just ask for a vote on something that people felt they weren't informed about. So the education piece was tough to navigate. And, I think any big change like that is difficult. I think it was a shift for the hospital. They were used to making requests and we would say yes, and they'd get their money and we'd all be on our way. And so this is it's a big change for them. So there were just a lot of moving parts and a lot of different people and stakeholders who had opinions. So trying to get everybody in alignment and to understand why I wanted to do what I was doing was hard to navigate at times. But
And while you were navigating all of that, did you feel like you learned something about yourself?
I learned a ton. I mean, I learned a lot about obviously the nuts and bolts of running an endowment and what being a good fiduciary is and stewardship. But I learned that even though I don't have a background at all in finance, this was a very kind of finance heavy project to undertake. So I learned that I guess even if you don't have a background that's specific to something you're trying to accomplish, you could still get there by leaning on people who do have the background and asking the right people to be in the room to get to a resolution. So I kind of trusted my gut. I knew that it was the right thing to do. I did get pushback, but I stayed the course and made sure that I had the information I needed to make my case and back it up. So yeah, it was a big lesson in kind of resilience, setting a goal and getting there, but also, I can sometimes be a little bit of a bull in a china shop. So to have to slow down and bring people along was definitely a learning experience for me.
You've been involved with Rainbow in some capacity, starting at the age of 13, and then as a part of the foundation. What do you feel like makes the Rainbow Baby and Children's Foundation unique to other companies and organizations, or not companies, unique to other organizations?
Well, I mean, I think, there really aren't any other children's hospitals that I know of, or if there aren't many who have this fundraising arm who exists solely to give money back and help kind of boost and subsidize things they're working on. And so I think just from a financial standpoint, what we do is so important. It's all women, which is wonderful. I mean, it's interesting because there's like can be a lot, especially when you have them all together. It's a lot of ideas, a lot of strong women. So I think that just that dynamic has been really interesting too. And I think, the hospital they really appreciate us. I think they know how lucky they are to have us. So I just think the respect we get from UH and just in the community is really incredible.
Do you have a favorite story or moment from your presidency that when you think back on it, it makes you smile?
I mean, I guess whenever Ed Barksdale spoke at a board meeting or an event, like those were always, he was such an amazing speaker. So I think just the way he told stories and humanized the cases he was working on, he was always so good at bringing what we do and bringing the mission of the hospital to life and making us see how our impact matters. So any memory of him speaking or sharing patient stories makes me smile for sure.
In one sentence, how would you describe the impact of RBCF?
I think the biggest impact is we're able to show just how much change a group of committed volunteers can bring to an organization.
Wonderful. Yes.
Okay.
Well, with that, thank you so much, Danny, for sharing your
Thank
morning
you.
with us. It was great chatting with you, and we are very excited to see you around at events.
Thank you.